is one of the worst free throw shooting teams in the country. Providence is, I believe, the best free throw shooting team in the country, and that plays well into North Carolina's hands. Well, let's go to the guest line. Let's bring in Nicole Auerbach from USA Today. How we doing is you put out one of the better articles earlier today that I've seen in a long, long time that I hope to use some of your suggestions to help me win our bracket here at the station.
That's good, hopefully. I was trying to be a little bit like, okay, maybe I'll pick this team, or I'll pick a team that's a good three-point shooting team. It was supposed to boost, people and help them fill out their brackets today.
Well, all I need is to beat my wife, and those are all my expectations here over the next 3 weeks. Otherwise, I have to take her out to dinner instead of her taking me out to dinner. So that's what I'm hoping for. As a whole, before we get started on that article, we had your compatriot, Dan Wolken, on earlier. Anything that you saw out of the bracketology last night as it's released that caught your attention or made you scratch your head?
I'm guessing that Dan had a stronger reaction than I did to bracketology, because I didn't really have that many problems with it. I mean, I think that some of the seed lines were a little bit off, but the committee can justify things. I mean, there were some questionable ones. I know that a lot of people were up in arms about Louisville, but you know what? I know they've looked fantastic the last couple of weeks, but the body of work, and they didn't beat anybody in the non-conference. Their best win was Southern Miss. They missed a bunch of opportunities for good wins. Their RPI, strength of schedule numbers, were not as strong. For some reason, I got into all these Twitter arguments last night about Virginia versus Louisville. I was like, the Cardinals were not in the running for a number one seed. But I got into all these comparisons between those two teams, and I just, I know people argue about everything, and I actually didn't have too much to say about some of them, but I'm sure Dan had stronger opinions, especially probably about Louisville. But, even Kentucky's low seed, you can justify, the SEC wasn't that strong this year. I mean, a lot of this is numbers-based. It's not that hard to figure out. I mean, you can argue whether you like the RPI or not, but they're very straightforward in the whole process, and they're very transparent about the approach. So, I think they can justify pretty much all those decisions.
Nicole, Price Atkinson sitting in with Mark Sturgis tonight. Really, really appreciate you joining us. I really didn't have a whole lot of issues with the seating and anybody that was in or out. I really agreed with you, and I thought there's a lot being made about Louisville. I thought they maybe deserved a 3, but they didn't play anybody. It really caught my attention last summer when Rick and the Cardinals' schedule came out, and I didn't really see any quality opponents outside of North Carolina and Kentucky. Probably the quality win I thought that jumped out at me that they had in the non-conference was over Louisiana Lafayette, who was in this field after upsetting Georgia State this weekend. But I want to ask you about, we're talking about seedings, and you can argue here or there, but your column today, Anatomy of an Upset, was a great read on USA Today. Anybody that hasn't read it, really encourage you to go out and take a look. I want to ask, you talk about some of the ingredients in there. I just wanted you to go through some of these ingredients, in terms of the anatomy for an upset that you talked about in your story today.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things, and probably the biggest thing that most of these teams had in common, because I talked to people from Lehigh and Harvard and Davidson and Norfolk State and Florida Gulf Coast, a lot of the recent ones, because, honestly, there have been 7 teams who've beaten 2 seeds, and 3 of them have come in the last 2 years. So and obviously last year we had 3 12 seeds win the first game. We had Harvard was a 14. There were a lot of upsets, and I think that by talking to all these people who've been involved, I was trying to figure out some trends, and the number one thing is an experienced team, and that's what you get in mid-major conferences a lot of times, because these guys aren't guys that are trying to go to the NBA after 1 year. They'd be somewhere else if they were doing that. So they do stay for 3 to 4 years. Every once in a while you get a guy like C.J. McCollum, who was a Patriot League Player of the Year twice, and as a junior, and he's flying under the radar until he drops 30 points on Duke. So, and that was another piece of it that it helps to have a star player like that, a guy that can really shoulder the scoring load and kind of take over the game when you need him to. And that's what C.J. McCollum was able to do. Steph Curry, obviously, Davidson was able to sustain it and make a run, and Curry's numbers were just absurd during that run. I mean, it was like topping himself every time. And then, there are different, for Norfolk State, it was Kyle O'Quinn. He had 26 points and 14 rebounds or something in that upset. So it helps to have a guy who scores a lot. And it helps, if it's a guy that might play in the NBA someday, that's flying under the radar a little bit. But there were other parts. I mean, there were pieces beyond the experience and the older veteran team with chemistry. If they've been in the NCAA tournament before, if it's a senior-laden team, if they went last year or the year before, and so they're not, kind of blown away or they don't get overwhelmed by the moment. That was a big thing. Harvard had made the tournament for the first time in a long time the year before. But then so they were all, just happy to be there the year before. Then they come in, they're down to business, they pull off the upset, beat New Mexico. All these coaches kind of talked about confidence. You need to come into the tournament with confidence, either in the matchup itself. Obviously, matchups are the biggest thing out of all of this style of play. I mean, if you're, that's what determines these things, and these other pieces help, and they'll give you a shot. But if it's a terrible matchup, you could just get run off the floor. But so you have to be confident because as Shaka Smart told me, without confidence, anxiety creeps in. So you don't want that, and you want to put the pressure on the higher seed. And if you can get that momentum, if you can, jump out to start or answer a run that they go on or something like that, and play confidently, then they will get anxious. They will feel the pressure. There were some interesting other pieces. I mean, if you look at some of these teams' schedules, like Florida Gulf Coast last year, they played Miami, who won the ACC. They went to VCU. They went to Duke last year. They played at some really hostile environments, and then they said, drawing Georgetown, which was a co-Big East champ, on a neutral court, just seemed like such a great opportunity because they've been playing at Cameron. They had done the harder stuff, and they weren't in awe of a high major program. So all of these pieces kind of help, and then there's some wacky pieces in here, like Lehigh played Duke in Greensboro, which you think wouldn't be an advantage at all, but it just so happened that UNC also was good that year and got sent there too. So all of the North Carolina fans started pulling for Lehigh, and then the crowd, and then Duke gets tense. Duke feels the pressure, and then, all of a sudden, Greensboro becomes an advantage for Lehigh. So there were a lot of different interesting pieces to this. And one other indicator, which I think is why a lot of people are picking actually Oklahoma to be a potential victim of a 5-12 upset, is shooting, because they shoot over 50%, and Tommy Amaker at Harvard is talking about 3-point shooting, guard play, and how important that is when you're pulling off an upset. So all of those pieces together, or one or the other. But if you're looking for any upsets in your bracket, you want to look for like a guy who scores a lot, who shoulders the scoring load and who runs the team and can carry them to an upset. I would look for teams that shoot well, especially from three. And I would just, make sure their roster is a bunch of juniors and seniors and guys that have experience, that play together, and have good team chemistry. So that's a lot. It's a long-winded answer, but that's essentially the gist. But you can read the full article and all the anecdotes from all the coaches if you want on the website. But that's all I got for you.
All right, Nicole, you talked about one of the things is picking upsets at the beginning of the tournament, but maybe even more importantly is trying to figure out who's going to be around at the end. And of the 35 national championships that have been played since seeding began in this tournament, 31 have been won by 1, 2, or 3 seeds. So, that's a trend to follow as well. But I guess one thing is always pick a 12 over a 5, because it seems year in, year out, that's where the not the upsets start, but it's definitely part of the tournament bracket.
Yeah, I mean, I forget what it was, but it's like since the last, there's usually at least one. I forget where I started the math from, but obviously there were 3 last year. And one was Oregon, and Oregon was the big seeding issue last year, and they were underseeded. But, I mean, I think a 5-12, you sort of feel like some of those 12 seeds, like Harvard's a 12 seed this year. That's a good team. That's a very deep team, really great point guard, almost everybody back from last year's team. There's not that much of a difference, right, between maybe like a 7 and a 12. It's different than a 15. So I think that's why we see those. And 5 seeds could be overseeded. You never know. I mean, St. Louis got one. They kind of slumped into the tournament, had some bad losses towards the end of the season. So, that maybe that's what it has to do. I think, sometimes the 12s are a little better than better than the seed line, and the 5s might be a little worse. So I think that is a good place to start. But you're right. I mean, it's hard to predict these things, and then if you go all in on an upset and then that team doesn't lose, and then you're kind of out for a couple spots in your bracket, and then it kind of hurts you. But all that stuff's fun, I mean, I remember, Fran Priscilla said in the article that whoever is supposed to be the Cinderella doesn't end up being the Cinderella. So it's just so hit or miss, and nobody had Florida Gulf Coast last year. So it's always fun, it always surprises, and you can have all these trends, you can figure out things, try to seem smart about upsets, and then you get them completely wrong and your bracket goes to crap. So, you never know.
We've got Nicole Auerbach, USA Today college basketball writer, joining us on Straight Up with Sturge tonight, and, you said it, 7-10, 8-9, 7-10, and honestly, to me, even 6-11 games, those are... Yeah. While technically you're going to call them an upset if the higher seed team wins, to me it's not really till you can get to the 5-12s when the 12s and higher start winning that I see as really true bona fide upsets. But when we're talking about a 5-12, talk me off the Stephen F. Austin ledge. I just cannot stay away from a team that's won 28 straight games. I understand the league they play in and some of the teams they played, but when you won 28 straight, you know how to win. I don't care who you are, and it's hard. I think it just goes to show what Wichita State's done. It's just been incredible. Talk me off the Stephen F. Austin ledge.
I was going to say, do you Wichita State winning at all? If that's a theory. I'm actually, I picked this VCU to win that game. I think that was immediately going to be a trendy upset pick because of the winning streak. But I talked to some of, I went through some advice to try to pick some upsets, and I went to our bracketologist, Shelby Mass, and I went to Patrick Stevens, who does bracket stuff for Syracuse Post Standard, and they were, Stephen F. Austin, yes, has a great record, but as you were saying, the quality of opponent, they were arguing that it was a little bit inflated. I mean, there's nothing to take away from winning, games, and especially when you're on a winning streak like that, everyone's gunning for you. I mean, I think what Florida's doing is also incredibly impressive. They're on a really long winning streak as well. And all of that's great, but I also think, VCU has been the underdog before. VCU knows they know that they're being picked against. They know that that's a trendy upset pick. I just don't think that they're going to let it happen. I mean, VCU's defense, I've seen them 3 or 4 times this season in person, and it's as good as ever. I mean, their guards are, Havoc is living on. I mean, I don't know. If they're playing someone else, I might be tempted to take that upset pick. But,
yeah.
I think it's the record. I think that people just, that they are the ones that people are pointing to, now. But I think VCU is well aware of that, and I don't think they're going to let that happen.
Yeah, before we let you go, and I want you to make sure you tell our listeners where they can find all your work at USA Today and on Twitter, I want to ask you what your best value pick is, what your best value upset pick is. I've got Tennessee going to the Sweet 16, beating Duke. Who is your best value pick to get through the first weekend and get to the Sweet 16 as a quote Cinderella upset pick?
Like a double-digit seed?
Yeah.
So actually, I have Tennessee doing the same thing as you, so I won't copy you there. But I do. I'll go with Providence. And I kind of had a conversation with someone earlier who was really high on UNC, but I just watched Providence win the Big East tournament, and Bryce Cotton is so entertaining to watch, and he's fun, and he can carry that team. And it's actually that matchup against North Carolina I'm really excited for, because you got Marcus Page doing the exact same thing for North Carolina. So I'm thrilled that they're going to be up against each other in the same game. And I think it's going to be great. But I think Providence may be the hottest team coming in. I know, Michigan State. I know Louisville. I know there's other teams playing really well. But Providence had to win. Basically, had to win the Big East tournament. And they knew it. And they did. And they ran through Creighton, who, is the best offense in the country. And they just completely shut them down. Doug McDermott ended up with 27 points. But that's low for him. That's kind of an off night for Doug McDermott. But they were just so able to, they played a great zone defense. Bryce Cotton hit a ton of big shots. And I just like them. I just thought they're playing with a lot of confidence right now. I don't know, if momentum really carries over, but confidence does. So I really like them. And I know North Carolina, has played better of late. I saw them lose to Pitt at the ACC tournament, so maybe I'm just a little biased because of that. But I think they're beatable, and I think Providence is hot, and I could see them making a little bit of a run. They're an 11 seed, so I guess they technically would qualify.
Yeah, and what a storyline that would be after the Big East 30-on-30 with their old head coach and Dave Gavitt and all that information that came out last night. Nicole, our listeners can follow you on Twitter at Nicole Auerbach. What are you working on with USA Today this week? Where will you be so they know what to do to check in with you?
Yeah, I'll be in Raleigh.
All right.
Duke and UVA and those guys. I will be in the Friday, Sunday site. Got a story in tomorrow's paper about the 16 seeds that are playing in Dayton. Kind of interesting about why there's an advantage to do that instead of just going to the main draw. And about trust and coaches and players later in the week. So lots of stuff. And then I'll be on site in Raleigh and in New York the following week. So lots of basketball, lots of tweets.
Well, enjoy it. It's one of the best athletic events of the year, the NCAA tournament. Thank you for your time tonight, and look forward to checking in with you sometime in the future.
Yep, thanks for having me. Enjoy the madness.
All right, thank you much. That's Nicole Auerbach from Where Else Tonight but USA Today. And Dan Wolken and Nicole Auerbach. And listen, that should give you a lot of info. Now proceed with the filling out of your brackets. If you haven't already, again, make sure you go to WCCPFM.com and get in on our bracket challenge.